All right, good morning. It's Wednesday, February 3rd, not 23rd. The multi-front war in the Middle East is now 851 days old. I'm your host, Jonathan Schanzer. Welcome back yet again to the FDD Morning Brief. Well, the insanity on campus may have subsided a bit, but it ain't over, folks. A video circulated on Monday of a keffiyeh-clad protester bursting into a lecture by our friend Haviv Reddick-Gur at Haverford College, just outside my beloved hometown of Philadelphia. The woman was unwilling to show her face as she interrupted a talk where the audience's only crime, from what I could tell, was learning. I'm not shocked. I'm not surprised. I don't know if I'm angry, but I must say this stuff is getting really, really old, especially as we see precisely zero campus outrage over the slaughter of 30,000 plus protesters at the hands of their oppressors in Iran. Today's guest is Adi Schwartz, an Israeli journalist and writer who co-authored the book The War of Return with Einat Wilf, former member of Knesset, aspiring new member of Knesset. Their book examines how the West's perpetuation of the Palestinian refugee narrative and its obsession with the two-state solution have blocked lasting peace. Oh, and the recent documentary released in Israel, I believe it was Channel 11, called Unraveling UNRWA, is based off of this book. Conversations about Gaza's reconstruction continues. Adi joins us today to discuss an often overlooked dimension, the fact that Gaza's society itself needs rebuilding from the ground up. This is not just brick and mortar stuff, folks. This is just ideology, ideas, basic principles. It needs to be started at the ground level. So stay tuned for that conversation. Should be interesting, coming your way in just a few minutes. Tensions are still sky high in the Persian Gulf, and it looks like things are going to stay that way for a few days at minimum. Yesterday, the regime tried to harass an American aircraft carrier, the USS Abraham Lincoln, with a drone. Our sailors shot it down. The IRGC reportedly also harassed a merchant ship flying those stars and stripes in the Strait of Hormuz. Seriously? The Iranians need to learn the rule of holes. When you're in one, stop digging, because Donald Trump continues to threaten, quote, bad things, unquote, if Iran doesn't negotiate to his satisfaction in the coming days. And I'm pretty sure he's not bluffing. Pretty sure. As for those negotiations, they were slated to be held in Turkey. Now it looks like Oman, or maybe some other country where the government pretends to be an American ally while hosting terrorists. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is visibly nervous. He warned Trump envoy Stephen Witkoff to be wary of the regime. He's seen the Iranians fleece their American counterparts in talks before, and he definitely doesn't want that to happen now with the regime weakened and on the ropes. Bibi is also worried that Team Trump might negotiate over nukes, but not proxies or missiles. In other words, the Iranian threats would persist. So it's high-stakes diplomacy coupled with a dash of almost war, throw in some ongoing conflict between Israel and Iran's terror proxies, and we've got ourselves one hell of a weekend brewing. And holy moly, I just realized it's only Wednesday. Now for your headlines. Headline 1, UNRWA is back in the news, and that's generally not a good thing for the most corrupt UN agency on the planet. Yesterday, Israeli forces discovered over 100 mortar shells inside sacks of humanitarian aid. And what logo could be seen on those packages? Wait for it. You guessed it, UNRWA. Troops found the bags in southern Gaza. In its press release, the IDF included footage from the operation. I suppose UNRWA could try to claim that terrorists were just using their bags to obscure their weapons transfer and that the agency had no idea. But you know what? After 2 years of war, that stuff just sounds like bull fertilizer. It rings hollow. Sorry, UNRWA. You're in the doghouse and you're staying there. Headline 2, speaking of flawed UN agencies, let's talk about UNIFIL. This is the purported UN peacekeeping force in Lebanon that doesn't keep peace. Earlier this week, the IDF dropped some sort of non-toxic chemical substance near the Blue Line, which is the unofficial land border between Lebanon and Israel. It's not clear exactly what happened there, but I do know that the Israelis have been consistently clearing greenery to ensure unhindered lines of sight. UNIFIL was outraged. Oh no. The Israelis gave the peacekeepers advance warning, but UNIFIL was still very grumpy. That's reportedly because the operation caused it to cancel more than a dozen scheduled activities. Okay, here's my question. What activities? UNIFIL has spent decades sitting on its collective tuchus as Hezbollah entrenched itself in southern Lebanon. So I can't wait to see the sun set on this rotten agency. It's been a waste of American tax dollars and a waste of space. But seriously, folks, what activities? Come on. Headline 3, let's stick with Lebanon. Lebanon's army chief headed to Florida this week for meetings with American counterparts, maybe a little bit of sun as well. Who knows? The army chief, that's Rudolf Heikel. He was supposed to visit the U.S. last November, but that trip was canceled. Finally, he made it. He met with the good folks down at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa and will reportedly meet with American officials in Washington before flying back to Beirut later this week. But let me just say this. I hope these visits are not friendly or breezy. Let's remember the Lebanese army is supposed to disarm Hezbollah. Let's also remember that they haven't yet. Heikel needs to get right with the Cessation of Hostilities Supervisory Committee. That's a mouthful, but it is the oversight body established under the November 2024 Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire. That came just after Israel blew up a bunch of Hezbollah beepers and turned the tide of the war. Well, paging Rudolf Heikel, get it together, man. The LAF is missing out on a generational opportunity to free itself of Iranian and Hezbollah influence. All right, that's enough hot air from me for this morning. It's time for my conversation with Israeli journalist and author Adi Schwartz. Without further ado, let's welcome him onto the program. Welcome to the FDD Morning Brief, Adi Schwartz.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. All right, let's talk about what's going on in Gaza. You've kind of made a really, I think, an interesting observation that yes, we can talk about UNRWA and we can talk about right of return, but really what we need to talk about is the reconstruction of Gaza's societal underpinnings. That is not a small thing here, right? This is about national narrative. This is about a complete overhaul. So talk to us for a minute about your concept.
So I think that we generally tend to skip or to not think about the ideology and the narratives of the Palestinians. We are very much focused on technicalities, such as the 20-point plan and what will happen exactly, the Board of Peace, the International Stabilization Force, who will be there, when exactly or where exactly is that yellow line. But underneath everything, we need to think about the people themselves, about their motivation. At the end of the day, people do what they want to do, what they hope to do, their hopes, their wishes. And unfortunately, as someone who investigated it, and as you said before, we wrote a book together with Einat Wilf, the Palestinian ideology for the last century has not changed much. And that ideology says that a Jewish state cannot exist in the Middle East. A Jewish sovereign state is not legitimate in any way and in any border. And and this is not something which is only Hamas or only the Palestinian Authority. They're combined in this. This is something which is true for the entire Palestinian society. Now, if that is the motivation, then we have a problem, because as long as this is the motivation, then the execution of the next October 7th is only a matter of 1 year, 2 years, or 5 years. So we have to take care of the motivation and the ideology.
Yeah, and good luck with that, because that is a generational project. And I think you're right. There's not been a lot of talk about it. I mean, I know they're talking about changing the education system inside the Board of Peace. I know they're talking about some of the societal constructs, but wow, you're talking about a complete national narrative overhaul, and that does not seem like an easy thing to do.
No, it's not. It's not. But actually, if we are talking about reconstruction right now, then this is exactly the moment. If it's very difficult, it is very difficult. But then if it's impossible, then why should anyone pour so much money? Why should we reconstruct Gaza if you're going to have the same result in 1 year or 2 years? Right. We have written these articles 5 and 10 years ago, so I hope this time we won't make the same mistake.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking about maybe making mistakes, we're hearing that the Trump administration may seek to end the reign of UNRWA inside Gaza but not necessarily in other places, right? So Lebanon, Jordan, maybe even West Bank. As a guy that studied UNRWA, had studied this sort of phenomenon, what's your response to that? How would you advise anyone, all right, this board, this international body, how would you suggest moving forward?
So definitely no UNRWA, and even more importantly, no refugees, no right of return. If you have any kind of governmental structure, then it has to be in their bylaws, in the constitution, that the residents of Gaza are no longer refugees. They recognize that they don't have a right of return. I'm very happy. I will be very happy if you're right, and that UNRWA will not be anymore in the Gaza Strip, but it should be dead and deceased. And the only way, that's also for your first question, the message has to be very clear. If you leave Gaza intact in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria, in Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, then what kind of message are you sending the Palestinians? The Palestinians have to have a very clear message from the international community. That's it.
Yeah.
If you want our help, you have to live next to the Jewish state and not instead of it. So for that to happen, you have to abolish UNRWA altogether.
Yeah, and I'm concerned about, the continued teachings of UNRWA in places like Judea and Samaria and the West Bank, what that will do. I think it sets us up for potential, long-term hatred there. They're the perpetuation of it. And of course, in Jordan or in Lebanon or in other places where UNIFIL operates, it's not helping things either with the Palestinian population. We need to have consistency across the board. I think I agree with you there. All right, I have maybe a bigger question for you, and this one's been on my mind a lot lately. We're watching the Board of Peace try to get to a better place. It's moving at a glacial speed. I mean, let's be real about this. It's not happening quickly. I'd love it for things to speed up. I'd love to see Trump, kind of win the day and overhaul Gaza, rebuild it, from the ground up. If that doesn't happen, that means that Israel needs to stay in, what maybe we're calling it the green zone, the yellow zone, whatever that is, this area that's 53% of the Gaza Strip. There's still fighting going on. It's not a lot, right? I mean, I think there was an attack overnight and, they're still hitting the occasional Hamas fighter, et cetera. And we're not seeing rockets, and that's all good, right? But how long does Israel, do they have staying power? Will the population continue to support the deployment of large numbers of troops? Maybe not what we had before, but still a large number of troops to stay in Gaza for another year, another 2 years. The exhaustion thing, I think it's better, right, than it was. But I do recognize that Israel has definitely been taking it on the chin now for 2.5 years. That's not a short amount of time. So what's the sense that you're picking up about a long-term deployment?
So I'll tell you that part of my answer is perhaps also wishful thinking. But, we have gone through this October 7th, and I would like to hope that the Israeli population is willing to pay the price that is needed. And even more than that, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu have said again and again, and by the way, even this morning, Eyal Zamir, the chief of staff, said again that we didn't finish the job. We have to dismantle Hamas and make the Gaza Strip demilitarized. They say it again and again and again. I don't see this government able to, okay, guys, we simply can't do it anymore, so let's go home. I don't see it happen. And there's still many people living in that Western Negev. So what are going to happen with them? Again, this is my wishful thinking. I hope that the Israeli population will have the stamina that is needed to finish the job. We have to remember we still have an election year, so that's also a factor. Nobody knows.
Nothing's happening before elections. That's for sure, right? And I don't think you're going to see the Israelis move out of southern Lebanon either during an election year, right? No big moves, right? They're going to need to stay the course.
If anything, you won't see withdrawal, that's for sure. But perhaps you'll see even more intensified combat. That's the only scenario that I can envision.
Yeah. As we say, withdrawal doesn't work. Not in the bedroom, not on the battlefield. That's a little racy. Sorry. Okay. Now, all right. Another question for you here. talk to us about this flap about the new logo for the NCAG, this entity that they're standing up, this thing that is answering to the Board of Peace, this new government that is supposed to take over the Gaza Strip. It is the same logo as the Palestinian Authority. They just changed the name. It used to say Palestine under it. Now it says NCAG. Okay. This did not sit well in Israel. So talk to us about how that played out.
So again, I must admit it's a little bit funny, and it shows how much sometimes people are, stuck on the small things. But again, Netanyahu promised that the governance of Gaza will not in the hands of Hamas and not in the hands of the PA. And all of a sudden, everybody sees that the logo is the PA. So there's an outcry. Oh, you promised there won't be PA. But to be honest, I don't think the problem is the logo. The problem is much bigger, as we said in the beginning. The entire Palestinian society has the same ideology. It doesn't matter if these people are from the PA or from Hamas. Currently, there is no governance possible by the Palestinians who is willing to do peace with Israel as we mean the word peace. So again, the logo is a big issue here, but it shows perhaps the reluctance to go deeper and to understand the deeper problem that we have with the Palestinians.
Yeah. Yeah. Good luck with that. The idea of battling over the legitimacy of the PA, whether it's the same thing as the NCA, this is a mess. At least from my perspective, I think we've got a lot of work to do. Adi Schwartz, the new leader of this NCAG, I think has some explaining to do. I guess we'll wait and see. All right. You're based in Israel. I have to ask you, I mean, we're watching the tensions that have been just racking the Middle East for the last 2 weeks now straight. I mean, 2 weeks ago, Donald Trump almost bombed Iran, right? And now for the last 2 weeks, we've watched this assembling of this massive armada. We're watching tensions go sky high in the region. How is Israel coping with this? Everybody's, of course, very aware of what's going on in the region. We've been watching all these, defense drills and the IDF talking about its readiness, and Eyal Zamir, who you just mentioned, flying to the United States for consultations. This ongoing thing, it seems like it's never ending. And that, of course, leaves everybody in a high state of tension. So what's happening in Israel right now?
So I think there's overwhelming support for some kind of a strike in Iran, and the heavier the better. Who could have imagined, like 1 year, 2 years, a decade ago, that the United States would bomb? I'm speaking about June, what happened in last June. So there's overwhelming support for such an attack. There is fear. People are worried that something worse than what happened in June. But my, personal assessment is that nothing much worse can happen. They have their ballistic missiles, certainly less than they had in June, because many were hurt. Hezbollah is hurt. The Houthis they can do what they can. So there is worry, but I think that there's, again, overwhelming support. If Israel decides to join, or the Americans want Israel to join, this will be also something that Israel is overwhelmingly support. Not only morally with what happened, recently with the protests in Iran, but Iran is our biggest enemy. It has wrecked the Middle East. And I think that any minute that they stay in power is a minute too much.
I think that's true, too. Although I will say this, two things that I've heard in recent days that I think, maybe add some wrinkles to this. Number one is that if the administration decides to move forward with conflict, that there is a high likelihood that the Israelis not go to Iran, but rather to Hezbollah, and to finish off the job there, because the Lebanese armed forces have failed to do their job. At least that's something that people are openly talking about. The other thing that I've heard, which is very worrying, is that, in fact, that those ballistic missiles, they're back up to previous levels, maybe even more than what they had before. And that, obviously means danger for Israel. It could mean danger for American forces deployed across the region. It could mean danger for oil facilities in places like the UAE and Saudi Arabia, and not to mention, the civilian populations. All of that, I think, is weighing heavily on the mind of Donald Trump right now. I think he wants something that's a little neat and clean. I think the Israelis understand there is no neat and clean. It's the Middle East, right? So I guess we're going to buckle up and we're going to stay tuned. But boy, I got to say, I've never been on pins and needles the way that I have been for the last 2 weeks watching this. And I can only imagine what it's like when you've got a front row seat in Israel, knowing that you could actually have incoming again, like you did back in June. I know that was not fun.
We have all the fun here.
Yeah, you guys do. I mean, boy, you are right in the middle of all the action. All right, last question before I let you go. Assuming the regime in Iran is neutered or weakened or toppled, I mean, I think there's a question that I haven't heard enough people wrestle with, which is what happens to the region? I mean, the entire construct for Israel, right? You're an academic, you're a journalist, you've been thinking about this stuff for years, right? The construct has been Israel versus the Islamic Republic, the regime, and all of its proxies, the Ring of Fire. And Israel, this has been Israel's primary enemy for as long as I can remember. This is like 50 years of dealing with this toxic regime and its support for all manner of bad guys that they've armed and indoctrinated and everything else. If the regime falls and the proxies begin to unravel because they're not getting the support, they're not getting the weapons, they're not getting all the assistance they were getting, what does the regime look like, or what does the region rather look like from your perspective? I mean, there's always going to be some other threat because it is the Middle East. It ain't the Midwest. What do you see around the corner? If you're to try to look around the corner, what does it look like?
Well, I agree with you that there is no vacuum, and we already see this kind of Sunni radical axis, right, with the Muslim Brotherhood, Qatar, Turkey, etc. But I think that the demise of a Shiite Islamic Republic would be a huge story in the Middle East. It's not only the proxies themselves like Hezbollah and Houthis, it's the destabilization of Iraq, for example, the destabilization of Syria that we still don't know what will happen. So I think the entire region will have, hopefully, some kind of a stabilizing factor. Countries like Saudi Arabia and Oman and United Arab Emirates, which have tried to, take a different path, something more towards prosperity and technology and all this kind of stuff, which Iranians have tried to block. I think that we will have some kind of, perhaps even hopefully, a golden age in this area. I hope I'm not too optimistic for the Middle East. But I really hope, as you said, after 50 years of really, creating problems and civil wars in Yemen, in Lebanon, everywhere they poured money and ammunition. And by the way, in Africa as well, in Sudan, in the Horn of Africa.
Oh, the Horn is heating up. It's crazy. That's actually where I'm most worried right now. When I look out around the region, I think that's where a lot of proxy battles start to take place, as if Africa didn't have enough problems, right? But golden age, wow, that's some optimism there, Adi. I'm not even sure how to digest that. But you know what? Let's stick with some optimism. Let's try to steer things in the right direction. Let's hope that we see either the regime capitulate at the negotiating table or maybe on the battlefield. But a lot happening here. We're going to continue to watch it. I want to thank you for joining us this morning on the FDD Morning Brief.
Thank you for having me.
Optimism out of Israel. Wow. Okay, here's what FDD has on tap for you today. Who might succeed Erdogan as Turkey's president? In a new FDD memo, Sinan Gidi and William Duran assess the contenders. This is a new memo. Ankara is trying to replace Iran as the region's power broker. At least that's what it looks like. The next election will either cement some of these neo-Ottoman ambitions, or maybe bury them. Personally, I'm hoping for the latter. Read the memo. Check out who the people are. Pretty interesting stuff. FDD hosted an event yesterday with Greek Minister for National Defense, Nikos Dendias. It was moderated by yours truly. We dug into Israeli-Greek ties, Athens' partnership with the U.S., how Athens is dealing with an increasingly aggressive Turkey, and much more. You can watch the video recording of a fascinating conversation, if I do say so myself, and I do. It's on our website, fdd.org/events. Love me, those Greeks. Finally, check out the February edition of FDD's Trump administration foreign policy tracker. Every month, our experts assess the White House foreign policy across key areas from Iran and Sunni jihadism to non-proliferation to international organizations, and on it goes. We assign trend lines from very positive to neutral to negative and everything in between. See where the administration is succeeding and where it's failing according to our scholars. They call balls and strikes. I like that about our scholars, and some of these entries might surprise you. All right. It's time to kick this episode to the curb, folks. But don't worry, there's lots of stuff that you can still read and learn about. Go to our website, go to our socials. I promise you, it'll be fun. And yes, you can make a very tax-deductible and very appreciated contribution to our organization at fdd.org/invest. Tune in Friday for another episode of this program and our earnest attempts to make sense of the mess in the Middle East. Can't wait to see what happens next. Until then, I'm Jonathan Schanzer, signing off for FDD.